Okay, let's now go to the introduction to business laws. Now, uh, this is very important for you to walk through what we are about to undergo for the remaining days of the semester. What are we going to do? Why? What is the relevance of this subject? Why do we need to take up this subject? Now, as you have mentioned earlier, all of you are BS accountancy students. Now, as an accountancy students, either you will be engaged in accounting profession or in some business related profession. Some of you might take the accountancy board exam and become certified public accountants. And as accountants, you will be dealing with clients which requires accountancy works. Now, these laws are very relevant to your future profession. Regardless of you become an accountant or you become a business practitioner or you will engage in business. These are very relevant laws. Okay? Now, as you all know, that we as citizens of the Philippines are governed by different laws, and ignorance of these laws excuses no one, especially in relation to compliance of business regulations. Like for example, the setting up of a business entity, compliance of the reportorial requirement of the kind of business entity you are, whether it's a single proprietor, a partnership, or a corporation. That's part of your function. You have to comply with different regulations from different agencies of the government. You have the Securities and Exchange Commission. You have the local government unit from where you get your business license. You also have the Department of Trade and Industries, and also you have the BIR. These are the business regulating agencies of the government. And as accountants or as a business practitioner, you are required to comply with their laws. Okay? That is the precise purpose why you are taking this subject. Because we want to know what are these regulations that we need to comply later on when you become professionals or when you graduate or when you start to practice your courses. Okay? And become an accountant or engage in business practice. Now, this subject is also very relevant because your knowledge in accountancy or your technical knowledge in accountancy would all be useless without this knowledge of the laws. Okay? Your knowledge in placing or in identifying whether it's an asset or liability would be useless if you don't have the knowledge about these laws, because you cannot practice, or if you are engaged in business, you will be violating several regulations from the government agencies that I have mentioned. So this is why this subject is very important. Now, we will start off with the law on business organizations. I'll give you an example why this subject is very important later on when you become professionals. Law on business organization. When we talk about these laws on business organization, it talks about the kind of business that you will engage. Okay? What type of entity will you be engaging? Will you be engaging in a single proprietorship business? Will you be engaging in a partnership business? Or will you be engaging in a corporation type of business? Okay. So with that, we now know that there are three kinds of business organization. You have single proprietorship, partnership, and corporation. Again, your knowledge in accountancy, your technical knowledge of accountancy will be useless if you don't have the basic knowledge about these three kinds of business organization. If you don't know how to set up a business entity, that's all would be useless. Why? Because you cannot start business. You cannot start business if you have not complied with the regulation under single proprietorship entity. You cannot also start a business if you have not complied with the partnership regulations and also with the corporation. You remember that in exercising a business or attending to a client's business, it is required that you must first obtain a license from the government. If you do not have a business license, you have no right to engage in business, or you have no right to attend to those clients who are not licensed to perform or engage in business. So, these laws now, law on business organizations, comes to relevance. How should I set up my business? How should I start my business? So, in this law on business organization, we will try to distinguish, we will try to define first the different kinds of business organization. And then we will try to distinguish one from the other. We will distinguish single proprietorship from partnership and from corporation. Okay? Now, this business law is under a new curriculum. Okay? Before, we have a separate subject of corporation and partnership. The law on corporation, the law on partnership and corporation. But right now, it is already integrated under business laws. So I find it very necessary that we must include the law on business organization, since we do not have anymore a separate subject on laws on corporation and partnership. So it is now integrated here in business laws. So that's the first topics that we are going to tackle. Okay? The law on business organization. Okay? That's very relevant when it comes to your courses as accounting students. Next is we will be tackling on the law on sales. Okay? Now, this law on sales deals with the sale transaction between two persons. You have already undergone law on obligation and contracts. You know now what are the essential requirements of a contract. So a sale is a form of a contract. So necessarily in these topics, we will be dealing also with some topics from obligations and contract, because considering that sale is a contract, therefore it will also have an obligation. So we will be dealing with certain rules and regulations related to obligations and contract. Okay? So in the law on sales, we will try to define what is a law on sale. We will try also to know the effect if a person enters into a law on sales. What are the obligations of its parties? Okay? And when is the law on sale considered perfected, or when is it considered effective? And then we proceed with the law on pledge, mortgage, and anti-crisis. We will try to define these are also kinds of contracts. Okay? These are also contracts. So definitely we'll be touching topics also related to obligations and contract. As like with the law on sales, we will try to know the effect. If a party enters into a law in a contract of pledge, mortgage, and anti-crisis, what are the liabilities of the parties? What are the rights of the parties? And when is it considered effective? Okay. Same goes in a contract of agency. This is also a contract. So definitely, again, laws on obligations and contract will be dealt with in discussing this law on credit transactions. And then we have the warehouse receipt laws. These are existing laws of the Philippines, wherein there are certain requirements that you must be complied. When we start discussing about this topic, you will find what are these requirements and what are the effects if we fail to comply with warehouse receipt law. And then we will also tackle letters of credit. Letters of credit, the pertinent provisions on obligations and contract are also applicable in these letters of credit, as well as trust receipt law and bulk sales law. Okay? These are also existing laws that require certain compliance in certain actions by businesses or by individuals. Okay? What are the implications if we fail to comply with these laws? And of course, we'll try to know what are the provisions of these laws and why do we need to comply with the provisions of these laws. And then we also have the rules on concurrence and preference of credit. This is very important also in order to determine in situations wherein there are more than one creditors against the person. So what are the remedies of this creditor? If Juan borrows money from Maria and Pedro, and Juan is unable to pay both Maria and Pedro, who has preference? To whom should Juan pay first? So we will try to determine the rules when we go over with these provisions on concurrence and preference of credit. And then another important law is the negotiable instrument law. Just like law on partnership and corporations before, we have a separate subject supposedly on negotiable instruments law. But under the new curriculum, it is already integrated also in business laws. Now, these negotiable instrument laws, we will be talking about these negotiable instruments as substitute for money. What is the nature of a negotiable instrument? And when can we consider an instrument as a negotiable instrument? And what do we mean by negotiable instrument? Okay, we will touch here the different kinds of negotiable instrument. We have basically the promissory note, the bills of exchange, and the checks. These are the three kinds of negotiable instruments, basic kinds of negotiable instrument. So we will be dealing with this negotiable instrument. What are your rights as issuer, as maker, as a payee, as drawee, or as drawer of the negotiable instrument? And what is the effect also if you fail to comply with your obligation? By the time that we are going to discuss that, we will learn what are the obligations or what are the duties of the different parties. Now, we will also tackle in relation to the negotiable instrument laws, we will also tackle the bouncing check law. This is governed by BP 22 or Batas Pambansa Bilang 22. This refers to a negotiable instrument which is a check. The effect if a person issues a worthless check. What will happen if a person will issue a worthless check? Thus, is that person answerable to the other person? Is that person answerable to the government? What are the liability of that person in case he issues a worthless check? It's called as a bouncing check law because if a person issues a check without any funds, the principle is that it will be returned to the issuer, to the person who issued the check, or to the person who made the deposit or to the holder. Meaning, ni-bounce ang imong check kay gibalik man sa imo. Instead unta of encashing the check or exchanging the check into cash, wala siya na exchange into cash, but rather it is returned to the person who holds the check because of either insufficiency of funds or that the account is already closed. That's why it's called as bouncing check, because it bounced back to the person who seeks to exchange the instrument into cash. Okay? And then after that, we will also tackle about the FRIA law. Okay? This FRIA law deals with the Financial Rehabilitation and Insolvency Act. Okay? Meaning, if a person has not anymore enough assets to cover his liabilities, what are his or her remedies under the law? If you are an individual person, what are your remedies if you do not have enough assets to cover your liabilities? Can you just escape with your obligations? Or you have no more remedy? Okay? So this is the remedy provided by law, the Financial Rehabilitation Insolvency Act of 2010. And then we will touch also some other business laws that are related insofar as our discussion is concerned. Okay? So that's a walkthrough of our topics for the rest of the semester. So that's what you're going to expect when it comes to our discussions.